Thank you, Chair. Well, in the Pacific, we have two important frameworks already in place. One is a food security framework for the Pacific, and the other one is Youth in Agriculture Strategy Plan. Well, for the framework for food security in the Pacific, it recognizes the many food security issues the Pacific faces. It then provides policy directions and guides for actions to address the food security issues we face in the Pacific. The first action that the policy advocates is strengthening leadership and coordination on addressing food security problems in the Pacific. The framework recognizes that working in silos or in individual ministries or programs cannot solve the many food securities that we face. We also recognize that we tend to commit to act on food security problems in the region, but when it comes to reality, a lot of times the support that we're getting is quite disappointing. Climate change is getting more funding, but not for food security. So we're hoping that with this framework in place, it can then provide guidelines or direction in terms of providing support for these two important issues for the region. The other important issue that this framework tries to address is strengthening framework and regulations on food security in the Pacific. One thing that the Pacific realized for its member countries, there is quite still limited regulatory systems in place to regulate food safety, food standards, and so on. So the framework calls for action to improve food security, food safety, and food regulations in the Pacific region. The other priority area that the framework looks at is strengthening food production, marketing, and consumption of local food. Now, one of the biggest issues facing the food security in the Pacific is NCD problems. If you look at the WHO database, the Pacific is in NCD crisis at the moment. We have the highest rates of NCDs in the world. So there is an urgent need to start addressing NCD problems in the region. And one of the causes of this increased NCD rates in the region is mainly due to increased consumption of these poor quality imported food and neglecting the quality local food products. The other priority area that the this framework looks at is strengthening food security information in the region. Now, we face many challenges in terms of data on agriculture, fisheries, and so on. So one of the things we're really advocating under this framework is strengthening data to enhance planning and action on food security. Currently, the Secretariat of the Pacific Community is working with various partners and member countries to improve these knowledge gaps on food security and climate change. Interestingly, what we've been finding in 15 countries that we have assessed so far, these food security systems for the Pacific Islands are badly impacted by climate change. So we need to strengthen these data in terms of for food security and agriculture in the region. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Gibson. I think one question I would come back to you is, you said that this policy would allow you to get some support from outside. The question is, I think also the Undersecretary General mentioned it earlier, is the key thing is national leadership and ownership. So in terms of resource allocation, do you see that the governments are committed to agriculture in the Pacific?
Thank you for the question. Well, that's one of the things or one of the priority areas we're trying to do under the framework, to really promote ownership of this framework at the national level. So we're looking at identifying what we call food security champions, to take ownership of this framework. And it's still a challenge, and I think it's not really necessarily the prioritization of the governments, but I think it's really based on their national budget constraints. It's still limited to address the many issues facing the food security.